from an Israeli perspective, they're concerned about something to do with the United States. They're concerned about the fact that the United States is going to have direct talks with Hamas. So there was a confirmation that Steve Witkoff is going to meet with the head of the Hamas, Khalil al-Hayya. And from an Israeli perspective, they're not very happy with that, although the American administration is, well, clearly on the side of Israel, in favor of Israel. In Israel, they're not happy, and they're talking about being prepared and also telling everyone to keep an eye with this meeting that's going to take place between Steve Witkoff and Khalil al-Hayya. Previously, Israel said that they don't want the American administration to speak with Hamas. They lobbied them not to. Adam Boehler did go, and the American administration at the time, they did not declare these talks. But several pro-Israeli elements within the United States administration leaked the meetings that Adam Boehler had with Hamas at the time, and then he had to take himself out of the picture. But now there was already a meeting between Witkoff Kushner and the leader of Hamas. Now they're preparing another meeting. Israel isn't happy with that and is worried about something happening with the United States. Like there was a lot of debate recently about the recent statements coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, and according to some reports, this book that he was reading, The Jews versus Rome, and potentially, comparing the United States to Rome at the moment, because some pro-Israelis in the United States, pro-Zionists, like to portray it as if, Israel an ally, Israel is an ally. They're, of course, one of the two, either completely depraved or blackmailed. That's what it is. If you're a Zionist, that means you're depraved. And if you're a Zionist, that means you can also be blackmailed. So one of the two or the two combined. But they try and say that they're our ally and they love us, and without Israel, there's no the US. And Ted Cruz the other day is saying that if the right or the Republicans start to hate Israel, that means there will be no America in 5 years. Also, all sorts of garbage coming from these Zionist mouthpieces. Desperation. Ben Shapiro's desperate. Everyone is desperate. They're in crisis mode now, full crisis mode. But the anti-Zionist camp in the Republican wing, or what's called the right wing in the United States, isn't backing down. So Israel's going to have a lot of headache. But they're trying to portray as if, they still have the upper hand, although from a popularity perspective, they know very well that they're doomed and that their days are numbered. They're just buying more time. And statements like, for example, the statement of Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon made an interesting statement not long ago in relation to Benjamin Netanyahu. Steve Bannon was in the Trump administration. You know Steve Bannon. Of course, the Trump administration in the first term, every Monday and Friday, people were being removed and other people were brought back to the administration, to the White House. Let's listen to what he had to say here.
Netanyahu's government has been atrocious, and we should have regime change in Jerusalem, and we should have it immediately. They've lied to the American government. They've lied to the American people consistently.
That doesn't make Steve Bannon good, by the way. He still has the same views, but he changed his perspective on Israel, and he's calling for regime change in Israel. Not necessarily as a man against Israel or whatever it is, but he's coming up with these solutions or ideas, He's saying we need to have... there needs to be a Palestinian state. He's suggesting like a Christian state in Jerusalem, all sorts of nonsense. But people like him who are influential, who are heard in the United States of America, they affect and bother Israel. Israel is worried about that. Israel is worried about the level of anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist sentiment rising in the United States with no return, as in there is no going back. So the people who either changed their position from previously being supporters of Israel because of their ignorance, because of all sorts of other problems or ties that they might have had with the Zionist lobby, or getting, decent amount of money, but then saying enough is enough, and they couldn't be blackmailed to remain on that camp, unlike others, are now saying that there's no way you can go back on that. And of course, some people were anti-Israel and anti-Zionist way before that. And we are in a situation, however, now where it's more likely than ever that Israel would want to try to drag the United States administration, led by Donald Trump, into another war with Iran. Because, well, you can see the pattern. So let's say Donald Trump began with a softer tone with Iran during this term. In his previous term, he was the one who ruined the deal that they had with them. That was a win-win deal apart from Israel. Israel just doesn't want any deal that the United States or European countries have with, Iran or other countries in the region. And they listen to them like little slaves. The prime ministers of several leaders of European countries, and the president of the United States, like slaves for the Israeli prime minister and the Zionist lobby. But we have evidence that the United States is willing to participate with Israel in an attack against Iran. If people can't see that, then they're not seeing very clearly. Although that attack of the United States administration at the time under Trump in the 12-day war was limited, was theatrical to a large extent, and was unsuccessful to a large extent because it did not eliminate Iran's nuclear capacities, and it did not destroy all of Iran's nuclear facilities. They did not take the establishment down. They did not take down their strategic capabilities, and that's why there were still attempts to talk afterwards as well. But of course, after Israel felt the power and might of Iran with their missiles landing on the child-killing, depraved pedophiles of Israel, they knew very well that they needed to have a rescue rope from the biggest servant, the President of the United States. That leads us to one very clear conclusion, that the United States, regardless of their readiness, preparedness, or overall willingness or economic situation to go and participate in an all-out war, they have the willingness to participate. Now, that participation with Israel could be limited. It could be limited to airstrikes, but even if the United States participates in airstrikes against Iran with Israel, they will be inflicting more damage than what Israel can do on its own. But they know very well that that is going to be a very risky adventure, because then they're going to be talking about potential participation or at least more assistance coming from China and Russia. Both China and Russia were supporting Iran during the 12-day war. Both Iran and China, Russia and China, were supporting Iran after the 12-day war. And we're not just talking about small support, by the way. We're talking about advanced radar systems. There were talks about a deal that included over 100 fighter jets coming from Russia to Iran on fighter jets that the Iranian pilots are already trained on. There were talks about at least 10 fighter jets coming from China in the form of J-10Cs, which would change the equation in air-to-air combat because of their air-to-air missile capabilities with Iran. That's more for the long term, because the Iranians are more accustomed to the fighter jets coming from Russia, whether old or new, added by the radar systems, advanced radar systems, advanced air defense systems, logistical capabilities, intelligence capabilities, and internal security capabilities too. All of that was there. Now, despite the fact that both the Russian and Chinese leaders don't outright declare such support and try and keep things as quiet as possible, similar to what China did with Egypt when they had the drill with them in Sinai and reportedly gave Egypt several J-10Cs. And as a matter of fact, we know that the Chinese put advanced air defense systems in the Sinai Peninsula. They do similar stuff with Iran, and with Iran, it's more difficult to get hold of all of the information for the distance. And from an Israeli perspective, they already had several surprise elements with their spy networks inside of Iran when they started to attack Iran. The attack initially in Iran started from within, Zionist cells within Iran that were quickly captured, many of them, and found out. Many people were found, and many of them were sentenced in Iran. They're going to have to come up with a new surprise, because the element of surprise is going to be very important. If Israel is going to show Iran that they're going to go, the Iranians would have more chances of taking more preparation and having more measures in place to try and minimize the effect of that Israeli attack against them. However, the fact that they are now testing emergency calls across all of the country, and the fact that they were already having support from China and Russia and preparing themselves internally, them confirming that their readiness now is 10 times more than on the 12-day war that happened in June 2025. All of these things indicate that Iran is potentially prepared for any attack that can happen at any point. You see, there was something dragging to the previous attack of Israel, where the Israeli prime minister said that if the talks between the United States and Iran would not succeed after 60 days, because Trump at the time was talking about 60-day ultimatum, but then that started to extend. But Netanyahu used to say that if there is no progress in taking down the Iranian nuclear program, alongside other demands that he started asking Donald Trump to add from Iran, we're going to attack them. If the talks fail with the US, we're going to attack them. And he did. Now, they didn't give a certain ultimatum, but they did say that it's not over. The Israeli defense minister at the time said that he was bragging about having Iran as an open space where Israel can attack anytime. We, of course, didn't see that, because the Israelis are cowards. Whenever there's a vulnerability and threat to their life, and whenever they get a good beating, they understand their place. They understand the language of force, as they did historically. And the several figures in the Israeli military and security establishment, and also politicians as well, said that round two is going to be inevitable. With Iran, it's going to be worse than before. Because if they, and their narrative now is, we're going against all of our enemies, we're going against all of our threats. If Iran is the biggest threat for them, as they're saying, likewise with several American officials stating that Iran is their biggest problem too, albeit officials who are mentioned in the Epstein files. Again, you go and make that connection, like Tom Barrack. Tom Barrack said that Iran is the head of the snake and Hezbollah is our enemy and we need to cut the head of the snake off. He was mentioned in the Epstein files. And as a matter of fact, there was an email being sent to him by Jeffrey Epstein asking him sarcastically, send me a photo of you with a child. Imagine the depravity. Imagine the criminality, the pedophilia that we're talking about here. People in power, in administration, serving people. They're supposed to be public servants. These people who are rapists, child molesters, pedophiles, murderers, killers with blood on their hands and with crimes that they haven't been accused of officially. But we have the evidence to support that. And because there is no release of these files in their total capacity, all of them, with the evidence, with the video evidence, and with the audio, they can continue to serve. And that's why the Americans are outraged. However, what's important here for people to realize is that so long as they're there and they are making decisions and they are totally allied with Israel, they have the capacity and power to drag the United States into another confrontation with Iran that doesn't serve the American people, that the American people do not want, that the American people are sick of, and that the American people are against. As a matter of fact, the majority of the American people, in several polls, by the way, when they're asked about which country the United States should take action against, they said Israel. The United States Army should take military action against Israel. But instead of that, they're supporting Israel with money, they're supporting Israel with bombs, and they're even willing to sacrifice in the blood of Americans for another war for the sake of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu.